Hot Pursuit.
Good morning. Wasn't it, I don't know, who saw the rainbow last night? Do you see the rainbow? You guys, it was a double rainbow. It was beautiful. I just loved it. And the sunrise this morning was beautiful. It just is so exciting to see spring coming and just all the green and the birds. And it reminds us of God's promises, that his mercies are new every morning. Over the next couple weeks, Pastor Paul is going to be sharing some vision with us of where we're going with our building and all of that, so you don't want to miss out. And next week is Mother's Day. Wait, don't all you guys turn on your ears. Next week is Mother's Day, okay? So whether you have, if you have a mother to bless or you're a dad, like it's time to think of the moms, okay? Just a little tip for you. So this week, we are starting a new series, and it's called Hot Pursuit. What do you think of when you think of Hot Pursuit? I know I think of like the law enforcement chasing after a suspect, and they're like, I'm going to get him, and it doesn't matter what it takes. They are going all out because that person is worth chasing, right? Because when we're in hot pursuit of something, it doesn't matter how much effort it takes. If we have the desire and the need to do it, we're going to do it no matter what. I think about love, right? So when a man is wanting to get to know a woman, he will figure out what she likes. He will take the time to understand. He might even change things about himself or stop doing things so that he can show her that he is in love. Because anything that's worth it is worth going after really hard. That's the truth with anything in our lives, right? If we have something new that we want to learn, let's say we want to learn how to paint, or we want to make different health choices, we know that it's going to take some effort to pursue what we are going after. Now, sometimes we don't get a choice what we pursue. How many of you, when you were a kid, you got to take piano lessons? Because your parents were passionate about piano lessons or violin lessons or whatever it was. Or maybe you got to play the sport that your parent loved, right? And so you got to pursue it. Or maybe you had to read a lot of books because your mom said reading books is really good. Sometimes we're in a job and there's a new program, and all of a sudden, we have to learn a new program, and we get the choice what to do. Well, there remains a time and an age in our lives when we get to decide, will I keep playing the piano? Will I keep playing that sport? Will I keep going on this job, or am I going to pursue something different? Now, some things that we pursue in life are really fun at the beginning. If you think about a new relationship or a new job, or you're like, I'm going to work out, and you're passionate and you feel like nothing can stand in your way, right? But there comes a time when you get to decide, is my desire for the outcome worth all the effort that I have to give? So when we think of hot pursuit of Jesus, we have to think, what does that even mean? What does it mean to be a hot pursuit of Jesus? It means that we are intentional with going after him. We're intentional with knowing his heart. It might mean that we have to change things in our lives so that we can know him better, so we can become more like him. When we're in hot pursuit of Jesus, it's not just coasting. It's not just thinking he's going to do all the work. It's not just living however I want. Being in hot pursuit of Jesus is intentional, and it requires our effort. Now, for me, I'm like, okay, that's just for the super spiritual people, right? That's just for the pastors, or that's just for the people who don't have any kids. Right? The people with lots of time. It's for the retired people. It's for this person. It's for that person. However I want to compare myself, I can always think, oh, it's just for them. I know that I want to pursue Jesus, but it requires so much effort sometimes. That's what I feel like. And I already feel like I have so many demands on my time. To be a good mom, to be a good friend, to be a good Christian. And I'm like, how can I do it all? My to-do list feels so big already. And I say things like, well, maybe when this part of my life is over, maybe when this season is over, maybe when. And it can feel so overwhelming. But you know what? Jesus knows us, and he does not leave us in that unhealthy balance of like, but I can never do it all. In fact, he speaks directly to us. Look at what he says in Matthew 11. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Okay, first of all, who does he say can come to him? He said all, right? What is the only qualification for coming to Jesus? That you are weary and burdened. The only qualification, do you qualify? I qualify, right? So any of us, it says all who are weary and heavy burdened. Now, when Jesus was speaking to his audience in Matthew, he knew what life was like for them. You see, God had given the Jewish people some commandments. Have you heard of the 10 Commandments, right? He had given them these laws, these boundaries, not because he's a cruel slave master, but actually as a gift to them. He said things like, take a Sabbath, because he knew that rest refreshes our soul, our body, our mind, that we need that rest. He said things like, don't kill, steal, lie, or commit adultery. Why? Because he's a killjoy? No, because he knows that those things bring strife and hurt and pain, and he wanted to protect us from those things. It's kind of like with our children, right? We put boundaries around them. We want to make sure that they're safe. So we put rules on them. We want to make sure that they're okay, and we want to make sure they grow into good adults, right? So we have boundaries on them. Well, the Jewish leaders at that time, they were so dedicated to God's laws that they made rules on the rules on the rules. And there were so many rules that people had to follow. So many things they had to do, they couldn't do. And even if they, took one extra step, it was a sin, right? So these are the people that Jesus is talking to. The people that knew what it was to be burdened and to be weary of trying to be all and do all and not mess up and not be judged. And it was incredibly burdensome to them. But at the same time, I feel like Jesus is speaking to me. I often feel so overwhelmed, stressed out, anxious by all the shouldn'ts and the have-tos that I have in my life. And I feel this tension between striving to be good enough for all the people, for myself, for God, all this striving, and just coasting and just being like, all right, whatever happens, happens. And then I feel guilty, right, for living like that because I know I shouldn't. And then I mess up, and then I hurt people, and I sin against them. And then the heaviness is just there again, because that's the last thing I want to do is be hurting people. All this tension leaves me with my eyes on me and what I can do. And I forget where my eyes are supposed to be. And that is a really hard place to be. All these pressures are like this thing on my shoulders that directs my emotions, my will, my mind, right? Like you feel this heaviness and you want to know, how can I be different? But it's so heavy and all these pressures yank me around and control what I do and how I do it. And this is what Jesus knows. This is what, when Jesus is speaking to his audience, he knows this is how he feels. And you know what he compares it to? He says it twice in this passage. He says, take my yoke upon you. And then it says, my yoke is easy. Do you know what a yoke is? Well, I'll tell you, it's not the yellow part of an egg. Okay? That's not the kind of yoke I'm talking about, all right? No, one definition of a yoke is that it's something that unfairly limits our freedom. And that's often how it feels, isn't it? When we have this burden on us, we feel like we're just stuck, that we don't have the freedom to be and do what we want. Well, there's actually a physical yoke as well. There's going to be a picture up here. There's a beam that fits across 2 oxen, right? That they are hooked together in order to make the burden light. And that is what a yoke is. So when Jesus says, take my yoke on you and learn from me, I have to think, wait, what? Okay, put the picture up again. Look at this. See that cow right there? He's like giving you the side eye, like, you want me to do what? That's how I think sometimes we feel, right? Like, wait, Jesus, you want us to be yoked with you, but I thought when I came to you, it was just going to be easy. That you were like, I'll do it all. Isn't that what we want to hear Jesus say, right? Like, you don't have to do anything. Like, you can just get a free ride. In fact, I think this is what most of us want, this next picture here. Right? Isn't that what we want? Someone just pushing us along and we're like, we're just free, right? Like, that's what we want. But Jesus says to take my yoke upon you. And the truth is that we are all yoked to something. There's something on our shoulders that's influencing us. Sometimes it's our pride, our selfish desires, our need to be liked, our need to be wanted or needed. And that is what is controlling us. That is what we are yoked to. But the truth is, you can't wear 2 yokes at the same time. So if we're yoked to something, which we all are, and Jesus says, take my yoke upon you, there's an action there. That means I have to take off the yoke that is already on me so I can take on his yoke, which is light and easy. And you can think, I don't even know how to do that. Jolene, that sounds really great. Just take the yoke off, right? But Jesus doesn't leave us hanging. He is so faithful. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. He says, learn from me. Now, there's 2 very important things that have to do with learning, right? The first one is we have to be willing to learn something. You think about that calf that's in that picture, right? The calf that is the new one, right? He's with somebody who's new, and now he's yoked up with this new calf, or this new, like the bull or whatever, right? And he has to figure out how to make this work. The more that he fights against the yoke, the more he tries to go his own way, the more he tries to do his own thing, the more it hurts. And it is not until he surrenders his will, surrenders his way of wanting to go, that he realizes that yoking up with this older, more experienced bull actually makes life easier. He has to learn that. Because when he's with that other oxen, it's not about punishment. It's about learning the easier way. So when Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. He's basically saying, when you're at the end of your rope, when you can't do it by yourself anymore, when what you have been doing isn't working, when you've been trying to hide all your weaknesses so no one would know, when you are weary, come to me and link up with me. Because I am here for you and I love you, and my way is going to be a lot easier. But you know what? It does take that action, right? The action of taking off something. But I know that when I'm in the middle of a really hard thing and I'm overwhelmed, the last thing I want to do is think about surrender. Oh, no, right? When we are stressed, we are like, I want it my way, I want it now, or I want it like it used to be. And now you're telling me I have to surrender? That is not where I want to be. And yet Jesus is suggesting that we take off what's weighing us down to put on what he has for us. So what kind of things do we need to take off? And it's important to remember that when we take something off, we need to put something else on. Otherwise, we just are going to continue to drift and will likely take on the old thing again, right? So let's think about some things that we need to take off when the burden seems so heavy. I just came up with a few things. One of them is when I need to take off doing it on my own. Doing it on my own, right? Like my way is best. It's always worked, which it really hasn't, but we have learned to make it work, right? So we have to take off that pride of saying, I'm going to do it my way. And instead, we take that off and we put on admitting that it's not working and that I need someone else to walk beside me. I need some new direction. Another thing we need to take off is the appearance of having it all together. Right? Aren't we good at that? We're good at the mask. We're good at making sure everyone thinks everything's okay. And God wants us to take off that appearance that everything is okay and instead put on humility, put on vulnerability. Because when we are vulnerable, that is when God can do his most precious work in our lives. Because we open up to him and he can come in with truth and life and grace and bring healing to us. Another thing we need to take off is busyness. I know I use busyness to hide what I'm really dealing with. If I can stay busy, I don't have to think about all these other things. I don't have to think about what's going on in my heart if I can just stay busy. I'll even, after I do something, I'll put it on my to-do list just so I can check it off, right? Because I want to be busy because it feels so much better. And God says, I want you to take off your busyness, and instead, I want you to put on being okay, being still. That it's okay to just sit in my presence. You don't have to be busy, and I will meet you there. You're not going to be sitting there and feeling such a weight on you, but I want to sit with you. Another thing we need to take off is making everyone happy. That people-pleasing, making sure that everyone in our world is doing good, that is exhausting. That is exhausting. Jesus is like, take that off, and instead, it's okay to put on healthy boundaries. Put healthy boundaries on yourself of what is good for you and what is not. We need to take off our harsh words, the things that are our automatic responses of anger, and instead, we need to put on those gentle words because a gentle answer turns away wrath and does a whole lot more good than harsh words. And lastly, we need to take off freaking out. Okay, like really, like just freaking out when things don't go our way, when life feels out of control, and we need to instead put on patience and self-control. Now, of all those things I just listed, how many of you now are sitting there and you're like, great, I have so much to work on now. Thanks, Jolene, for my big to-do list, right? But that is exactly what a burden is. When what we feel like we have to do is more than our strength, is wider and deeper and longer and bigger than what we think we can do on our own. So when Jesus said, learn from me, he wasn't demanding perfection. He wasn't demanding that you arrive at perfection and that you never make mistakes. In fact, isn't it true that the more we learn, the more we realize we have to learn? Right? Like, that is what I am finding in life. I learn things, I'm like, oh, I have more to learn. So the first part of learning is having a desire to learn. But the next part of learning is who the teacher is. Have you ever had a coach or a teacher or a boss who was so demeaning and rude and downright mean and prideful that you wanted nothing to do with them? That really, you wanted to get out of their presence as fast as possible? You really didn't care if you played hard that day or not, because your coach was not a good coach. But then, have you had a coach or a boss or someone who makes you feel like you can do anything? Who makes you feel like you can accomplish anything they put before you? And you are so motivated because of who your coach or boss or teacher is. Who is doing the teaching makes a whole lot of difference in our lives, doesn't it? So Jesus, when we think about what kind of teacher he is, he actually tells us. He says that he is, verse 29, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. Oh, gentle and humble in heart. Isn't that what we love? Not harsh, not prideful. But Jesus doesn't just say he's gentle and humble in heart. Jesus actually lives it. Okay? You think about that woman that was caught in adultery. When Jesus came into that situation, he did not just throw a whole bunch of judgments on her. Instead, he was gentle, and then he said, now go and sin no more. And I can bet you that that gentleness spoke to her heart in such a real way. And you think about the woman at the well, right? He didn't come to her with all the things that she was doing wrong. He called her out in gentleness, and it was so gentle, she actually left and went and told the whole town, you gotta come and see this guy. You gotta hear what he has to say. Because that is who Jesus is. Gentleness and truth mixed together. Gentleness, grace, truth, all in one. That is the kind of Jesus that is offering to teach us. He's not demanding that we learn from him. He's offering that we can. And he knows that it's going to be one step at a time. I want you to watch this little video of babies who are just learning to walk and have not yet arrived at perfection.
Mason, stop making yourself dizzy.
Oh, Mace, be careful.
Big girl. Come here, Abigail. Uh-oh.
When babies are learning to walk, the parent doesn't just take the baby and put it in a race and say, now go, and you better be perfect at it, right? As parents, we know that learning to walk is a journey. First, you have to learn to sit up, and you have to learn to get your balance, and then you learn to stand on your own, and then you might take a wobbly first step, and you're not going to be perfect at it. And we don't get disappointed as parents when our kids fall. We're not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I've told you once, or you've tried once to walk. What's the problem here? Right? We don't do that. We're actually so grace-filled, and we celebrate any effort or success, right? Anytime, oh my gosh, how many of you have pictures or videos of the first time your baby or grandchild stood by themselves, right? Because we're going to celebrate what they have done. And really, if you think about a baby learning to walk, it's like they know that grace follows failure. They know it without even knowing that they know it. Especially if there's someone, after they fall and they get a bump and a bruise, that wraps them in their arms and says, you're going to do it again next time. Try again. And they want to try again. Now, if that's how we are with our kids, think about how much more God is like that with us. That he is not demanding perfection. And he's there with open arms saying, just try again. Take off that yoke. Take off those things that are burdening you. And come and walk with me. Jesus knows it's a journey, not just a destination. So Jesus says to learn from him, and then what is his promise? Let's look again. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. So what's his promise? Rest. Rest for our souls. And what is rest? Rest is peace. Rest is not striving. Rest is when we know that we're safe enough to give up control. That's what rest is. And he says, rest for your soul. And what is our soul? Our soul is made up of our mind, how we think, our emotions, how we feel, and our will, how we make decisions. So Jesus is promising rest for our mind, our will, and our emotions. Notice that he says you will find rest. Find seems like it might be an action word, doesn't it? He doesn't say you're just going to be given it. He says you will find it. It's going to take a little bit of action. Now, this kind of rest that Jesus is talking about is not the kind of rest of zoning out on your phone endlessly or binge watching Netflix. That's not the kind of rest. Those things, I'm not saying those things are bad, but that's not the kind of rest Jesus is talking about. It's an action. It actually reminds me of Proverbs 3, 5 and 6. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. He will make your paths straight. Isn't that the way that feels restful? When you know that when you're on that path that is straight, that is restful? Because you can let go of control because you know you're on that path. And what is it that helps you get on that path? Trust, not leaning on my own understanding, and acknowledging him. those kind of actions. Now, there's a really important part we haven't talked about yet in this message. We've talked about who can come to Jesus, all. We've talked about that we're supposed to take his yoke. We've talked about that we're supposed to learn from him and what kind of teacher he is. We've learned that he wants to give us rest. But we might say, how can I get there? How does this happen for me? The first 3 words of this passage give us the answer. It says, come to me. This invitation to come into his presence, this personal invite to come into his arms. When he says, come to me, he's saying, you've been trying to do it all on your own. Come, I got something for you. When I choose to come to him, I'm choosing to trust him. I'm choosing to believe that he is the one that offers me grace and forgiveness and hope. I'm choosing to believe that he took the burden of my sin and the weariness of me trying to do it all on my own. And when we come to him, we get the best rest of all. What's the best rest of all? Knowing that Jesus took the punishment of my sin. That's the beauty of John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. That is the perfect rest, everlasting life. And if you're here and you're like, that's what I've been missing. I've been missing that perfect rest that gives me hope, that offers me grace. We do want to connect with you. And sometimes I wish, that once we made that decision to come to him, that life was perfect. That we didn't have to do anything else. That everything was just smooth sailing. But that's not how it is. In fact, Jesus wants us to come to him every single day. You know, when you are pursuing learning an instrument, if you only go to your lesson 1 hour a week, and you never practice the piano, let's say, after your 1 hour lesson, are you going to get any better? Are you actually going to become a fantastic piano player? No, because 1 hour a week does not mean that you're pursuing. And so Jesus wants us to come to him more than 1 hour a week. It's an everyday decision. And we all have excuses of why we can't. I don't have enough time. Well, I compare myself to this person. They have all the time. Or they're in this season. It's easier for them. Or we might even say, but I don't want to do it wrong. What if I don't read enough of the Bible? What if I don't pray long enough? I will tell you that anything worth doing is worth doing a little bit at a time and not being perfect at. And sometimes we just don't know where to start. When Jesus says, come to me, and he says, I want you to get to know me, I want you to pursue me, and we don't know where to start. And I want to encourage you this week, I want you to start with just being in his presence. This last week, couple weeks of my life have felt really crazy. I've had to do things I didn't want to do, like history fair projects. And then I've had to do things that I did like to do, like have a big fundraiser for where I work. But in the midst of it all, my kids knew that I was in do mode. And they could feel it. And after a really hard conversation with Ezra, God's like, I have something for you, Jolene. And this happens to me all the time, okay? Pastor Paul will give me a scripture or a topic, and then I get to learn it, right? I'm like, oh my gosh. there has to be an easier way, but this is the best way. So Ezra and I had this hard conversation. It's now 9 o'clock at night, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna do your history fair project. And he's like, Mom, I thought that we could just sit and have some tea and sit on the couch together and watch your favorite show. It's like, yes, Ezra, that's exactly what we should do. He was saying, Mom, I'm learning, and I just want to rest in your love. Can we just be together? Instead of having to do. And Jesus was saying to me, Jolene, I want you to just rest in my love. I want you to open yourself up in vulnerability so I can come in and I can bring refreshment. I can renew your mind, your will, and your emotions. So today, I'm going to give you the opportunity, all of us the opportunity, to sit in his presence for a minute. Because it is really easy to be do. And sometimes Jesus just wants us to sit and just be. And when I think of what Jesus must look like when I just take the time to sit, and I just take this time to be with him, this picture right here is what I imagine that Jesus is saying. This is his face saying, I love you. Thank you for coming to just be with me. Now rest in my presence. So just take a few minutes, look at this picture, close your eyes, and let Jesus pour out his love, his grace, and his rest on you.